Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Business. I'm your host, Kay Miller, also known as Muffler Mama. Stay tuned as I, along with my guests, give you marketing, sales, and personal branding strategies that will give you an uncopyable advantage. Today, I'm here with Kristina Flynn, known as Kristina with a K. And of course, I love the letter K. Kristina is an entrepreneur and brand strategist, building story-driven brands and communities for startup founders, venture capitalists, digital artists, and NBA All-Stars. Kristina, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kay.
We know each other a little bit through Steve, and you're members of an organization, a platform, Community Empire. So I've gotten to know you a little bit, but excited to take a deeper dive. Because even when I put that intro together, I just barely scratched the surface. So we will be talking about your story, and we've got a few things we'll cover. I'm just giving a little preview. Lessons learned by Kristina, the challenges that she's faced, including limiting beliefs, which is something I feel like women deal with all the time, and prioritizing revenue. And be sure to stay tuned till the end because Kristina has a couple closing thoughts for us. So Kristina, I'm going to stop talking, and I would love to have you just tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
Sure thing. My name's Kristina Flynn, Kristina with a K online. I have had a very atypical career compared to most people for an ADHD and neurodivergent brain like myself. It's pretty typical. It's been very winding. I started my career working in the NBA, and my role was being the conduit between business operations and basketball operations. So when a new player came to town, either from a new team, from the NCAA, or from overseas, I was one of the first people that they would meet with. And I had 60 minutes, which is actually a lot in the world of the NBA, to get to know everything about them. Their family, where are they from, where were they raised, what do they care about, what are their values, what are their interests. And then my job was to take all that information, which I was writing by hand at the time, and then take it back, package it together, and go to our business operations, whether that's marketing or consumer products or ticketing or corporate partnerships, and say, this is the way to position this particular player in a way that shows their authentic self and what's actually connecting them to the fans or to the sponsors, and in a way that they're going to be most comfortable, because people are going to show up differently if they're comfortable in the environment. From there, I left and went into the nonprofit world, and then I got the tech entrepreneurship bug, and I started building products, a lot of products for problems that nobody had, and did that all the way through COVID, and had been bootstrapping my company for 3 years. And COVID hit, our sales cycle dried up. There was a lot of problems. I don't like to just blame COVID. And we shut down shop. And for a while, I just went back to marketing and doing some brand work for different startup founders and VCs. Found my way into Web3 and NFTs and started building my own personal brand online. And that's where a lot of the key lessons and learnings came from, which we can go into.
I like the fact that you started out talking about how you had to get to know these basketball players because, of course, my background is in sales. I do have marketing and now personal branding, but so many salespeople don't do the things that you described. So you weren't doing that to sell them. And maybe that even made you a little more comfortable doing that. Do you feel like that was more natural because you're just establishing a relationship and getting to know them?
Yeah, and that was my job. My job was to get to know them because I was their conduit to the business side, which if professional sport at all, there's very little. When we think about the part that we all see, that's a very small segment of what actually goes on in that organization and for that player. So we only get to see the games. That's a tenth, if even that, of what that life looks like. And my job was essentially to be their conduit for all the other parts of that business. And so my relationship depended on getting to know them and creating a connection with them, a human connection, where I would have to find similarities between myself, who grew up in sort of small town just outside of Toronto, Canada, and a 20-year-old NBA athlete who's coming out of whatever, a Division I school that was raised in Compton. So I would have to find similarities and connections between them. I was doing it innately, I think. I don't think I realized what I was doing, but on reflection, that had a lot to do with it. And I know it's different than if it was positioned as sales, even though I was selling them in a number of different ways, because I had a visceral reaction to being against sales. I didn't like sales and I wanted nothing to do with it. So it for sure positioned me differently and positioned my own comfort with the players differently by not saying it was sales, but saying it was developing connection.
And so many of the skills and methodology are the same. So that might be helpful for you listening to just, if you could take that sales piece out, everything really in life is selling, right? Mm-hmm. Whether you're selling a product or service or a vision and an idea. I know that you're big into personal branding. I'm going to put your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, and go to LinkedIn and look Kristina up and you'll see personal branding. You'll start to learn about her personal branding right away. And when you were talking about getting to know the athletes, it's getting to know them authentically and in a genuine way so that they can connect with people because it's not just sports, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was a key learning for me that I took throughout my career. Again, very much so without really realizing it, but I love people. And I love connecting with people. The story part, it was never a planned thing. It was just something that I enjoyed doing. If I was going to work with somebody, I wanted to know about them. I wanted to know what was going on beyond just business. It's business for me has never been just business. It is personal. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in work-life blend. And for me, they are one and the same. And so that's something, again, I can articulate now. I wasn't able to before I did my own self-reflection and learned about my own personal story. But it's definitely something that I see as a theme and a constant throughout my career.
I love that phrase, work-life blend versus work-life balance. So you're talking about work-life blend. And of course, the more that we feel comfortable and enjoy what we do, the better, because people can really tell if you're being genuine and authentic. So you started out in that position, and then, as you moved into your other endeavors, which were quite a few, you had some things that you learned. And again, talking about those limiting beliefs, can you speak to that and help our listeners who are experiencing that same thing that they can relate to?
Yeah, I think for me, that's only become clear really within the last year. I think I've always known that I lacked self-confidence, although it wouldn't appear that way to many people on the surface. I grew up an athlete. I played basketball. I played college ball. So for me, I was always in the spotlight in my own little way and in my own little world. And I presented very confidently when I was doing things that I was comfortable doing. But in the back of my mind, there's always been this deep-seated lack of confidence in what I was doing and inability to really feel like I loved myself. Quite frankly, I held a lot of self-hatred. And in my 40th year, it all came to a head because really, and one of the key lessons that I learned, I had been in Web3 and NFTs, and I had found this space that I really loved. It was full of artists, and I had taken up art again, which I had done as a kid. So many of us lose these things as we grow up. And I had taken that back up again. It was technology, so I also loved that. I began building my brand, and I began talking about things that I was passionate about, which was really the lack of diversity that we were seeing in the space. And by all measurements, I was doing quite well. I had received acknowledgement from folks. I was getting attention in a positive way, and I was building this brand without really intentionally doing it, and got a great number of followers, 16,000+. I thought that I had figured it all out. The thing that so many entrepreneurs try to do, we figure it out. And all of a sudden, overnight, the bull market went to bear very quickly. I had never played in a market before, so I didn't know what I was doing. And I had invested a lot of money, and I had lost a lot of money. I had built a digital agency that was doing quite well and had clients. And overnight, my client budgets dried up. And the platform that this community was on, which was Twitter, and Elon Musk, which you can't write this stuff. Elon Musk bought Twitter And things changed. And I don't focus on the algorithm. I really focus on the audience. But at the end of the day, there was a distinct difference between my ability to connect with those people that I had built relationships with before and after he took over the platform. And so all of a sudden I couldn't connect with those people. And one of the big mistakes that I had made was that I didn't take that audience off platform. I didn't build an email list. So I had built this brand around a market I didn't control, a company and not me, a platform that I didn't control. All of these things, I depended on external things to build my brand and business. And when they went away overnight, it was a stark realization that I had made, which was, if I were to do this again, what would I have done differently? And in addition to all those things, it would have been, my brand had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with those external things. And I had a thesis that if I had been present and part of my brand and not focused on my company, if people had gotten to know me versus this profile picture that I had, which was a character, then they probably would have switched with me. They would have grown and evolved with me on my journey because they would have been connected to me. But they didn't, and they weren't. And so everything went away. And I promised myself I wasn't going to do that anymore. So that's when I took the step towards saying, okay, if my next endeavor is going to be about me, who am I? And that's where I had to go on a bit of a journey.
And you started out just mentioning confidence, and that is such a key issue for women. I say women especially, but the men that I talk to that are really honest, they have the same issue. And I have a guilty pleasure of watching Extra, which is entertainment stuff at the end of the day. And someone was interviewing Salma Hayek, and she said, yeah, I have imposter syndrome. I heard same thing from Chris Hemsworth, big movie star. He said, yeah, I have to balance fear with my goals. And so really, I think being honest and genuine is a good thing. And I love your advice about controlling the platform or owning your audience, because if you give it away to Facebook or what used to be Twitter, that can all change. So that's a great point. And I need that to be reminded of that myself.
Same, always.
Yes, we need to do that. And then we also, something you said was connect with people based on your personal brand. Even if you work for a company and you're in alignment, really, you've got to have a personal brand because you're competing for everyone's attention. And, products, services, so many things can be copied, but you cannot be copied. You have Uncopyable You. We just wrote that branding book. And you, as an LGBTQ woman, other challenges, but I have to say, anything that sets you apart and makes you memorable, you're not going to click with everyone, of course. But I think the fact that you're genuine and authentic in your personal brand, to me, I admire that a lot. I admire your story and who you are. And you learn some painful lessons, and change is going to happen no matter what, all through your life. And I think sometimes we get complacent about that, and it can take us down. Remember, what if this happens? What if that happens? So what else can we share with our listeners? You did talk about lessons you've learned through your journey, but also you mentioned prioritizing revenue, keeping your eye on the prize. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And before going to that, I also want to comment on something that you said there, which was, thank you for saying that you appreciate the authenticity in the story. That was not something I had a year ago. And I'm sure there were a lot of ways that I was showing up as my authentic self, but there were also a lot of ways, especially as you said, as an LGBTQ woman, identifying as a lesbian, I was very used to masking. I was very used to not showing up at myself. I talk about the fact that when I worked at the NBA and at the team level, there was 700 employees across multiple different sports organizations that this entertainment company owned. And I was the only out individual in that entire company as long as I worked there. And I worked there for 7 years. For me, I was very used to masking and I was very used to showing up as somebody else. So when I was faced with this challenge of, okay, I want to be myself online, I had to do what so many of us do now and say, who am I? What is the authentic me? And coincidentally enough, it became something that ability to interview those NBA players is something that really helped me, because I said, I think I need to do that. And I don't have a me. Luckily, I have AI. And so I went to AI and I said, you're going to interview me and you're going to ask me questions and you're going to help me reflect on who I am and why I'm unique and what do I have to offer that's different from anyone else. And I'll tell you, Kay, the insights I was able to retrieve from that blew up my entire focus from that point forward, because I saw so much power in being able to get a third-party perspective on who I am and why I was unique and what was the authentic me. And I became obsessed with it. And I've been obsessed with it over the last year, because I was like, why don't we know those things? Why do I talk to all these people, PhDs and Olympians and these incredible artists? And they're like, I haven't really done anything all that impressive. Or, yeah, but everyone has done that. Or that's not interesting to anyone. And it's just not true. So why was that? And so I delved into the neuroscience of it. And I was looking at things like habituation, of just the ability for our brains to see and receive the same information over and over again makes us unable to see it. And things like cognitive bias, that we experience the world and the world we experience is not necessarily reality.
Okay, let's stop right there, because I have an offer for you. As you know, Steve and I have written a brand new personal branding book called Uncopyable You, because your personal brand is what sets you apart. I've put together a 5-part email series called Building a Profitable Personal Brand, and it's totally free. It will help you get way closer to building and crafting an intentional personal brand that will level up your success. Go to beuncopyable.com/5-emails. I'll put that link in the show notes.
So many of the ways in which we present our authentic self are shaded with these biases. So having the ability for AI to use my own inputs and my own language and articulate back to me how I was unique and how I was different and what my story was, unbelievable. So that's where it all started. And from there, how I got to the focus on revenue was knowing I had this thing that I know is valuable, but I was consistently coming up against a wall and saying, it's not moving forward. And why is it not moving forward? And why am I consistently not focused? It's not just the ADHD, because I know that's a challenge, but I had gotten support from an ADHD coach and I was focusing on the right thing. So what was it? And I actually ended up getting a self-worth coach, which I didn't know existed. I didn't know they existed.
I didn't either. How do you find a self-worth coach?
I found her on LinkedIn. Her name is Rosie Miltham. She's based in the UK. And her and I did a services swap, because neither of us were able to translate that kind of currency between each other at the point we were at in our businesses. And she helped me to uncover my biggest limiting belief through her process, which was so interesting to go through. And she said, and helped me to discover, I do not innately believe deep down that I am worthy or valuable of anything. And we went through why that was. And I'm not going to go into that here, but I helped to make sense of why that was. And knowing that was affecting every single part of my life and all the challenges I was having, particularly with revenue, particularly with sales and asking people for money, asking people for good sums of money, and what my relationship would look like afterwards, because I didn't feel like I was worthy. So I had to over deliver services that I shouldn't be doing, or I would undercharge and then have to do a ton of work for not a lot of money. And I know these are not experiences that are unique to me at all.
They are not. They are not.
No.
Especially for women. I'm sorry, but especially for women.
Yeah. And when she said, you don't think that you're valuable, not just me now, like the part that I kept coming back to her with was, it doesn't make sense to me. And what doesn't make sense is that I, in one part of my life, am unapologetically me. I show up as a lesbian woman in places where I know that I'm not accepted. I live my life every day knowing that the majority of the world does not believe that I should be alive. The majority of the world does not believe.
I hope you're not right with the majority, saying the majority of the world.
Statistically, I am, okay?
Wow.
There's countries I can't travel to. There's countries that I would be jailed if they found out that I was a lesbian woman. There are countries where I could be killed for being who I am. There are many people in my backyard that don't believe me and my wife should have been allowed to get married, and me and my wife should have been allowed to conceive 2 children. And I own that, and it doesn't bother me, and I show up. And then on the other side, there's this piece of me that's worried about what somebody's going to think, and worried about, am I delivering enough value, and worried about asking somebody for money. I said to her, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't compute. And that's where we got to. It was because at the very basic level, you, who you are, coming out of the womb as a child, you do not see that child as valuable in this moment. And that was just like, it was mind-blowing because it was true.
You're talking about you yourself as that person.
Yeah.
Right.
Deep down, for if I did nothing, if I just existed, if I were to just be as me without accomplishing anything, giving anyone anything, do I see myself as valuable? And the answer was no, I didn't. It was always about proving my value. It was always about getting external validation. But that allowed me to focus on revenue, which I know is a big loop. Back to the conversation, I got confidence around that, and it's a daily grind. It doesn't come easily, but I've been able to more easily prioritize revenue because I now see the value in what I'm offering. I see the value in what I'm able to deliver clients, and I genuinely want them to have that value. I believe it's going to help them the way it's helped me.
There's a lot to unpack there.
I just unloaded, okay?
But yeah, you did. But those are such great points. So remind me if I don't get back to it about believing your worth and your value, because I want to start out with something that you said, and that is building a brand intentionally and taking the time to get to know yourself on a different level. And we talk about that in our book. I think brands just happen to people. That happened to me for years. You get hired by a certain company, or you date a certain person, and all this happens without you saying, this is what I want in life, and this is what I want to represent. And everyone has a personal brand. So you might as well take control, take the wheel, and decide really who you are. And I'm fascinated by the fact that you said AI has helped. Because I was teasing Steve. Okay, I work with my husband, Steve, and he's the co-author of our book. I said, you know what? ChatGPT is my new best friend. And I thought I was your best friend. Like, now you're
so typical.
Best friend.
I know, honey. You are my best friend.
You are. But the things that you can ask, including, I encourage everyone to ask AI what the world thinks of you. What do they see as your personal brand? And a lot of people that I talk to, business owners, people who have super busy lives, focused on other things, don't really even use AI. And so just like you are saying, you have got to take advantage of this tool. I use it for everything. If I'm stuck on something in a Google sheet, I said, okay, what do I do here? Oh, I'm in Kajabi. What do I do here? I'm in
Thought Partner. Yeah. I use it to have difficult conversations because that's something I really struggle with. And I sit with it and I say, this is the scenario. And this is the individual I'm going to have the conversation with. And this is why I'm nervous about this conversation. This is where the way I think they're going to react. And because of that, this is where my anxiety is coming from. And I say, coach me through it. What are the things I need to be bringing up? What's the key points that I need to remember? So I'm not remembering a whole speech, but I'm remembering what are the things that they are going to need to hear from me, because it's not just about talking at somebody. It's about talking to them in a way that's going to resonate. And that's helped me massively in my business because difficult conversations are really hard.
They are. And sometimes it scares me with AI because I'll ask a question. I'm trying to put the program together. And then it says, tell me how it goes.
Yeah, there's
You know what? Nobody else cares, but you care.
Listen, I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of how interesting and unusual it's going to become with the relationships that people develop with their AIs. I think if it's bound to happen, it's going to happen. I tend to not think about those things as much because they tend to creep me out, quite frankly, a little bit. And I'm trying to stay focused on what I can control. And I cannot control how AI develops relationships with all of us.
Exactly. And yes, the future of AI is unknown, but for the time being, if your competitors are using AI on any level to help create content or, like you said, to work through conversations or just, write good emails, you've got to use AI or you're going to be left behind. ChatGPT, we have the 4.0 version, but you can get the free version, of course. And you mentioned something else about technology. And of course, I'm older than you. You're not old. I'm old, but
old is relative, Kay.
Yes, old is relative. You know how old is? 10 years older than you. Whatever age you are, 10 years older is old.
I think that's the perception, perhaps. Yeah.
I'm old school and I did have to take notes after a meeting or preparing a meeting, handwritten, or maybe on my IBM Selectric. So now you can, just like this podcast, it's being recorded. I'll put it into Descript and I can edit it like a Word doc. Then I'll get that transcribed and then they'll put it in ChatGPT and say, what are the main points? What are the action steps? Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's unbelievable. I was actually fortunate enough as of today to be included in a Forbes article that was talking about the use of AI for business efficiencies. And I talked about one of the ways in which I use it. My process used to be very manual, just like I would do with the players. I would sit down with the client and I would talk to them for 90 minutes and I would collect all this information. Yeah, I'd put it in a Word document. And then I had this really intricate process where I would take the informations and the thoughts that I could see, the themes and the patterns, and I'd write them out on a big note pile. And I had all these ways of organizing my thoughts. And then I would create a written editorial story for them in version. It honestly would take me 3 weeks, sometimes even 4, to be able to deliver the first package back to them. And now I can meet somebody for 90 minutes. And I could, after that meeting, within 10 minutes, have all of those deliverables completely done. And it's not to say they don't require my involvement. It's the process that I've built up until that time and the workflow that I've refined up until this moment that I can now have an engine that I've built that can take a transcript and give that information back to me, of course. But it's life-changing and I'm able to scale at a much higher rate, and the value that I'm trying to deliver is able to scale for my clients much quicker, delivering people like this aha moment that I got within months to minutes. And that's just like a really beautiful thing.
It really is. I'm very excited about it. And yes, it's just, we can't even get at all the things that it does.
No, you ain't get time for 3 hours.
We're almost to the end of the interview, and you've given us so many great points and perspectives. So as I warned you about beforehand, what would be your closing thoughts?
I'll go back to the conversation that you had about the value and the self-worth, because you said that you wanted to bring that back. And I think if that part of this conversation resonated with you in terms of an audience member, I would very much so encourage you to explore that, because I've been talking to a lot of people since I had this moment that I've had and I went and discovered this work myself. And a lot of people are feeling that way. And when I say to them, that's the limiting belief that I've held my entire life, and at 40, that's holding me back, they're like, that's me. That's me. And I'm happy. We can include in the links Rosie's information as well, because she connects with people in a number of different ways. But that's the value and the self-value point. All I know is that sometimes it's really hard to see ourselves. So if that resonates with you in this conversation, do some digging. You can even do it with AI. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just start a conversation and say, I want to see if I have a problem with self-worth. What should we do together? And let it guide the conversation. The next part is the question that I'm often asked is like, where do I start? What do I do if I'm trying to build a brand online and I want to tell my story? And the first very simple exercise that I always give people is my 2 simple story lists. And those are based on the premise that you don't have to show up and be your most raw, vulnerable self at all times. You don't have to give your trauma. Nobody deserves your trauma. And that's what storytelling has become synonymous with in recent years. Story is any point of human connection. And I believe there's 2 categories of human connection. There's your primary and there's your secondary. And your primary, write a list. And it can be done on paper. It can be done in voice notes, whatever it is. And I want you to just write down, these are facts about your life. They are, what city did you grow up in? Where in the world did you grow up in? Do you have any siblings? What did your parents do for a living? What were your interests? What was your personality? Simple things that we can all remember off the top of our heads. Write them down on a piece of paper. The secondary points of human connection are similar in that they are just simple facts of our lives, but they're more directly created to resonate with your audience. So what are the things that potentially your audience has experienced? So I'm talking about education. I'm talking about career moves, the ups and downs of that. I'm talking about the things that you're exploring in your own business, day-to-day life experiences related to being an entrepreneur or related to being focused on brand. Whatever it is that you do, simple facts. For me, it's like, I went to university. I started in the MBA. I then worked as a tech entrepreneur. I moved to New York and I came back in COVID. I closed my company. More focused on how I'm going to resonate with my audience and just start with those 2 lists. When you have those 2 lists, your next step about how do you tell your story, when you're talking about yourself, put those words in. So when I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm going to figure out a way, if it makes sense, to say I'm from Toronto. And they don't have to say, I'm also from Toronto. They immediately internally, because our brains are wired to accept stories very differently than the way we accept facts and figures. When we accept facts and figures, or when we hear facts and figures, there's 2 areas of our brain that light up: processing and comprehension. When we hear story, there's upwards of 6 areas of our brain that light up. And that includes processing and comprehension, but also emotion and memory. We start experiencing what the other person's saying. So when I say Toronto, you say, oh, I've been to Toronto. Oh, I really love Toronto. All of a sudden, I'm having a feeling connected to you as a person. When I say I'm ADHD, oh my God, lots of people have been talking about ADHD. Oh my gosh, I am also ADHD. I saw this video on TikTok that was about ADHD. Again, we're not just taking information and credentials, they fly by. We're just processing and comprehending them. But when I say even just those 2 words, the connection you're able to have with me, it becomes emotional. It becomes personal. So start there with those 2 lists and nothing else. And if you start integrating those into your about page, into your talks, into your keynotes, I guarantee you're going to have a deeper level of connection with your audience and resonate more with them.
Very wise advice. And I think we've all experienced that. You hear a speech or you read a book or something like that, and there will be a lot of data. And then do you remember that data? Maybe. But what you do remember are the stories. And we all have them. And so the process of building those lists is going to trigger a whole bunch of different thoughts and expand, your options, your list of stories that will help you connect. So that was brilliant. That was brilliant.
Thank you. There's a reason why they say that people don't remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. It's because the stories make them feel.
That's right. We put ourselves in that story and we relate. Yeah, very powerful. We're going to close out here. And I do want to mention that we'll put some links in the show notes. And one of them is your self-worth coach, Rosie. I will also put in your LinkedIn address so people can connect with you there. And also you do offer a trial conversation, right? You can book a call with Kristina. And I will put the link in there too. Do you want to say anything about that?
No, I just love to chat with people if they're exploring this. Love to get to know what the challenges are and their problems are. See if I can help them a little bit on the spot, of course, and then just let them know how I work with people in a closer way.
Great. So all those links will be there for you. Thank you so much for listening. And Kristina, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Business. If you enjoyed the show, you know the drill. Please like, share, rate, and review it on your favorite platform. See you next time, and always remember to be uncopyable.